Okay, this is gonna be a very quick kind of introductory how to apply decals video. Emphasis on quick. I want to talk a little bit about the different kinds of decals. So here we have an example of the laser decals that you guys are going to be working on. Again, you can use Photoshop. These laser decals, they print black like this, but when they're fired on, you're going to get something that's somewhere within this vein. If it's fired lower, it's going to be a darker red. If it's fired higher, you're going to get a lighter application. But you can see, given the angle, that this is taken from an old photograph. We've got kind of a flag in the background. So what I'm trying to mention is with your designs for the laser decals, as you guys are thinking about them, as you're collaging them, etc., etc., the higher the contrast in the image, the more definition that you're going to have on the transfer of the decal. So for this, I adjusted the contrast. I took away all of the color. I exposed a little bit, played around with highlights and shadows, and do whatever you need to do, sharpen the image as well to get a nice crisp result this somewhere more along this line. In comparison to this is a more grayscale. It also depends on the look you're going for. If you want the information to be slightly more hidden, that's fine, but keep in mind that if you want a really crisp image, that you're going to want really high contrast. The laser decals, they do not come with a layer of what's called like a wax paper, whereas all of the, well, not all, a lot of our decals, they have had this removed. The pre-made decals, they come with a wax paper on top of them. If your decal has a wax paper, it's your job to remove it before applying, but I would recommend to do the majority of your cutting before removing it. We're not going to talk too much today about how I want you to actually use these decals. I want you to maybe even take the time to invest in maybe a smaller pair of scissors than what I have here. Also, investing in a really nice X-Acto blade would be good. I want you guys to really be thinking about how you could just take portions of these decals, collage them into something that then speaks to an image that is uniquely yours. Again, I'm gonna just make sure I'm recording because nothing is worse than, putting in the time and having no result to show for it. All right, cool. We are actually recording. Everything is happening. Okay, so I was going back to collage. I'm still working on gathering a good variety of collage artists that are working just 2D and not necessarily in ceramics, in addition to ceramic artists that are using decals that I think is being done successfully. So TBD on that, but for today, bare bones, how do I apply a decal? You can cut sections off of the decal if you want to. If you're applying to a surface that is not flat, I would recommend maybe looking into creating kind of darted areas in the decal so that it can then form around your rounded piece. That's why we're starting with trays, is so we don't have to worry about running into that. If you don't cut exactly around all of the edges of something, that's okay because the majority of it is clear. So if you don't get all the way around it and you're actually using a whole section of something like this leaf, then don't necessarily worry about cutting really detailed around those lines. It's okay for it to be a thick piece like this if you're using the whole part. But if you were just using one leaf, obviously you get the idea. You're supposed to take that portion only. Make sure that you keep track of the side that is shiny once you've removed your decal paper, because it's important when we slide it off that we're sliding it off like this and not like this. So we want to be sliding it off face up onto the piece of material, your object, whatever you want to call it. So let's get, I don't know, let's get a fan too. let's get 3 of them. All right, so I've got 3 of those. I want to use this. And then maybe even I want to try using this top part of the chair. I'm going to try to kind of create my own hybrid of food kind of a thing. Maybe even a little bit less than that. And then give it a jagged edge too, so it does look like it's composed artificially a little bit. I'm going to use these 3 fans, kind of create maybe something that looks like a half of a fruit. I don't know. Play around with them off of your piece before you actually attach them. Something like this. I think it would be great. I don't have a 4th fan, but I think it'd be really great if I had a 4th fan right here. And I kind of created a faux orange kind of a motif out of those couple of things. But let's instead take a little corner of this orange. Maybe we'll apply this right in here. Maybe right in here. So play around with the placement before you actually apply it to whatever you are applying it to. All right, so I'm going to think of maybe a composition kind of like that. Okay, so once you've kind of played around with your decals, we're starting with the pre-made ones. You are going to want to always start with clean hands, clean water. Some people like to use distilled water. Keep that in mind. And then you're also going to want to make sure that you've removed all of your waxy paper and that is all gone. I think I mentioned already, an X-Acto blade I think would be very helpful for working with decals. I'm probably going to sing to you guys in some of my demos. Sorry, it's just kind of like a habit. Again, these decals that are pre-made were donated. I am personally unsure what temperature they fire to, if they'll fire all the way off, and things like that. So you want to keep in mind that these are all tests, so invest, but also be aware of the fact that this is an experiment at first, and then based off of your results from your test tiles, you can gauge what you want to use on those final platters. So, all right, have nice clean water. Sometimes a little bit warm can be helpful, and we're gonna submerge them essentially for like 30 seconds. You can see that they'll start to curl up, and what we're trying to do essentially is soften that paper in there. I like to go one by one, and you wanna keep your other decals far away from the water, because once the water hits them, the glue that adheres these is going to be activated. So keep that in mind as well. Got my test tile. Got these submerged. And what I'm doing to test these as I wait for them to lift off of the backing paper is I'm simply kind of using my thumb and really gently kind of pressing and trying to slide them. And if they start sliding, then you know, if that top layer of decal starts sliding off of the paper just slightly, then you know it's about the right time to apply them. You don't want to leave them in the water for too long, because then what's going to happen is it's going to completely come off of the paper, and then you're not going to be able to slide the decal. Instead, you're going to be left with a soggy decal that you kind of, I mean, you can kind of use it, but not really. So, still waiting. What I'm kind of doing is with my fingertips, I'm kind of pumping water against the back of the paper, just trying to make sure that it is completely going through that porous paper. Okay, so here's a good example. You guys can see how I can start moving it around with my fingers like so. That's kind of your perfect zone that you want to be at. Anything looser than that, and you're gonna have a little bit harder time controlling it. So you simply want to make sure it's loose like this. You're gonna place it on to kind of about the area that you want it on. And then with one finger, you're going to press down on the edge of it. You're gonna very gently kind of just slide the paper away. And then let it hang out there. You can still kind of place these at this point, so if you wanna kind of situate it into a new area, you are welcome to do that. And then I'm going to maybe put both of these in at one time and allow them to soak up a little bit. And then this you can just discard. You never want to use hot water. I know I said warm water, but. And again, like I mentioned in your assignment details, decals were created essentially because China painting was too expensive and laborious. So they're kind of this baby of industry essentially. So think about how you can play with that, kind of this idea of like something being artificial. Or maybe not artificial, maybe more like less authentic to its original version. How could you play with that? Come on, little goo, come on, come on. The narrower, like a cut, is going to be on your decal, the harder it's going to be for you to get it off. Okay, so again, perfect stage, light sliding that I'm able to do, and then simply press your finger down until it starts sliding against the other one, and then you can kind of press it down with your fingertips, like so. And then we're going to squeegee them as well. Alright, so this one is also already very happy to come off of the piece of paper. A good question might be, how long do these dry? I like to dry them overnight. Some people will dry them for like only 30 minutes, but I would definitely recommend overnight. I can't decide if I like this or not. Maybe I want, just a little bit less orange. Okay, so I've placed that. Don't worry about like the little water beads at first. The only thing that you have to really be concerned about is if you can physically, if you can see, physically doesn't make sense. If you can actually see air bubbles underneath, that can be kind of problematic. So if you do see a bunch of air bubbles, you may need to remove, especially if it's a larger decal, you may need to kind of like readjust it with your fingertips, and then you may need to do more squeegeeing. I don't know how many of you seen the red rubbery mud tool ribs. Those are really, really good squeegees. Second would be those blue rubber ribs that you squeegee with. And we're almost there. My water is kind of cold, so I think this is just taking a tiny bit more time. Don't force it, because if you do force the decal to try and slide off before it's ready, you can kind of crunch it in half and warp and distort the decal itself. So also keep that in mind. You could just also be much more patient than I'm being and actually leave them alone. But I kind of like touching them a little bit at a time just so I can kind of constantly be feeling if they are ready or not. Okay, new discovery. It appears as though some of the fruit has a really thin plastic lining, so look out for that. I honestly couldn't even see it, so you probably won't be able to peel it off on some of them. So just look out for that. We are good and clear for that guy. Let's check my... Okay, so again, the leaf is going to be a little bit more tricky. You know what, maybe no orange. Maybe orange later on top? No, we're gonna go no orange. Change my mind. The leaf is going to be a little bit more difficult because I have that really narrow part right there. So what I would do is I would start by sliding it on the most kind of fragile area. And then perhaps kind of adjust these to overlap just a little bit more than what they're doing. So the space, so it gives the illusion that that space is not necessarily there between them. And then bring these little guys over here. Something like that. And then you could use just a little bit of paper towel like that to kind of try and remove a little bit of that water, or you could simply just leave it alone and simply wait for, let's say, somewhere around 20 minutes or so, and then check it intermittently through that 20 minutes. And then when it looks like some of this water here has evaporated, double check to see if you have any air pockets. If you don't really have any air pockets, it does look like I do really have any air pockets. Then you could kind of just not use the squeegee method and leave it as is, but most people do recommend using the squeegee. I'm just kind of a little bit of a rule breaker. So, and what you would do when you're squeegeeing them is you'll very gently apply pressure. So really you're just simply, I mean, how many of you guys have put on your own screen protector on your phone? Kind of a similar thing, just a little bit less pressure. We can go over that again if anyone has any questions when I actually have my little red squeegee. So I'm just going to put this aside for now. And really quickly, I'm just going to show you a little bit larger of a decal. And I already have this fired on, so I'm not going to really take the time to remove, you know, or scrape or whatever it may be. So we're just gonna overlay this on top, just for the purpose of you seeing what it looks like. And it could also be an experiment for me to see what it looks like to have an underlayer of enamel. This is nice and clean. And then again, I'm simply gonna put my decal in there. You can see how it kind of rolled up on itself. You could always use your hands to just kind of keep it open so that it's very evenly absorbing the water. These laser decals, they tend to take a tiny bit less time just because sometimes that paper is a little thinner. So again, I'm just making sure that this doesn't roll up on itself and that it's getting water from all angles. Okay, and you can see I already have a little bit of movement. So I'm just kind of testing it to see if I can move it all around, and then I may give it one final little dunk. And then again, I'm going to